It's Friday, March 6th, and today is the big one. This is the biggest day of our week-long severe outbreak, and this is going to bring the threat for tornadoes, wind, and hail. And if you haven't been able to tell already, the area this is going to affect is huge, and roughly over 50 million people are going to be under the gun today for all hazards of severe weather. I think we could see hail upwards of 2 inches. I think we could see winds around 70 miles an hour at the max. And I think we could definitely see a couple of strong tornadoes today. Now, unlike most other severe weather setups, there are normally areas which are going to be more active than others. But just look at this. There is pretty much going to be multiple huge lines that are seeing very active severe weather that include all hazards. First, let's start from the beginning and look at what's our setup for today. This cluster that's going to eventually end up around the Great Lakes region in parts of Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, also including the Chicago metro, is actually going to be the storm cluster that produced our massive tornado outbreak yesterday. This is going to come over here and this is going to produce all hazards. I think tornadoes are going to be definitely in play for this. There isn't even a strong tornado ruled out, although it's going to be more of a QLCS kind of linear nature. So I'm a little bit more doubtful. Maybe something to watch would be the trailing cell on a complex like this, especially for all hazards of severe weather. But for what's going to be the main Mac Daddy threat, if you will, back here, this giant line that's going to be along the Oklahoma, Kansas, then Iowa and Nebraska border, what we're going to have here is we're going to have a dry line that's going to kind of shoot up a bunch of our storms back here down in Oklahoma. That's where we're going to see the first area of convection. We're going to have some synoptic forcing the rest of the way. Also, that dry line, not really sure how far that forcing is going to kind of reach out, but I think it's going to roughly look like this. And then, as you can see here, we're going to have a cold front that's really going to push south and east, and this is going to provide a round two of severe weather as we go throughout the night. Another thing to note is that we are going to have a closed low that's really going to elongate and stretch out. You can see this right here. This is going to be our center. We're really going to have two closed off lows at one point as we go later into the day, and this is going to be responsible for evecting all of that moisture and warm air up, also providing shear. So I think the first rounds of severe weather are going to be around 3 to 4 p.m. with all hazards becoming possible around 4 to 5 p.m. We're going to see that around 4 p.m. right here in parts of eastern Oklahoma. This is when I think hail, tornadoes, and damaging winds are going to be possible. Big cluster here. Now, the main issue at this point is that there's not going to be enough deep layer shear to really allow these storms to organize, and it looks like there might almost be too many storms. But one thing you'll notice is that these storms are definitely going to have more of a discrete nature, and that's not really a surprise. Our shear vectors are going to be nearly perpendicular to kind of our triggering boundary, and that's going to be a really good sign that we're going to have discrete cells all the way up. So with that, there's going to be that right there. Now, this area, I'm not really sure it's going to be the most active area for severe weather. I think it will be very active, but seeing the strongest severe weather might not come out of here, but I think it will be the longest lasting. Now, if we move back up to that sector we were looking at, I think our biggest threat of severe weather is going to last in this area in the central and southern plains between 5 and 8 p.m. We're going to see a big cluster right up here. This is going to be kind of that point where our cold front and our dry line meet. I think near the south of this is the greatest chance of seeing tornadoes produced from this. But I think overall this is going to be a cluster that has a very good chance of producing some strong winds near 70 miles an hour, and also some hail. After that, we're going to start to see our line kind of fill in further down to the south, and it looks like there's going to be a decent chance that we see discrete convection kind of all the way up with this. And then all of these storms are going to have a decent chance of producing some serious severe weather, and strong tornadoes will almost be possible for pretty much all of these. I'm going to switch over to our significant tornado parameter really quickly. And this is what we're working with. We're seeing values up and down this line that are going to be in the high twos and threes. These are roughly where our storms are going to be. And this is what we're working with. It almost looks like the strongest probability of seeing tornadoes might actually be in eastern Kansas and not eastern Oklahoma like we currently have painted. And then, of course, these are going to still have the ability to produce some strong damaging winds and hail as well, because they're going to be discrete. I think hail could actually be a bigger threat here, maybe upwards of 2 inches, maybe upwards of 2.5 inches even. And then these are going to push on, probably going to lose steam a little after 8 p.m. That's when we're going to see that threat kind of decline. But then we're going to see our round 2 of severe weather come through when that cold front kind of knocks through everything like this. That's going to force up a big line of thunderstorms. And something about this line is that it's also going to have the chance to produce all hazards of severe weather. I'm going to switch back over to our significant tornado parameter, and you can see right up along our cold front, we're going to see a nice area where we kind of see a bunch of good shear. We're going to see some pretty solid cape right up along it too, anywhere between 500 to 1,000, which normally wouldn't be that good, but because our low level shear is going to be quite favorable at this time, there's still a potential for these guys to produce some tornadoes. I think that threat isn't really going to wane off until probably 2 in the morning out here, and then that's when we'll just see these become rainmakers. Now, I still think after 2 in the morning, things more down to the south, so I'm talking in Arkansas and southern Missouri, still could have the chance to produce severe weather, and tornadoes would not be off the table entirely at that time. I just think that threat is going to be a little less likely. And then at that point, we move into tomorrow's severe weather risk, which definitely isn't going to be small at all. The very last area I want to touch on, even though it pretty much seems like we've touched on everywhere from the US-Mexico border all the way up to the US-Canada border, it's going to be this little area right here, which is going to be the last area that our cold front kind of forces up some storms. And this would be in the morning hours, right before sunrise, probably about 5 to 6 a.m., where we're going to see the chance for kind of a tail end Charlie situation again to produce some serious hail. These hailstones could be around 2 inches. Then a tornado is going to be unlikely, but it's not going to be entirely off the table either. And now we're going to look at one of our few fail modes today for this storm, and that is going to be the location of our 500 millibar trough. As you're probably noticing, all of our storms were kind of out here, and this trough is quite a bit more out to the west than we'd like to see it. It's actually a bit more west and south than we'd want to see it to really get a ideal environment for tornadoes, especially. And this isn't entirely a bad thing, because it could mean that we're seeing a glancing blow, which would be good to get more discrete supercells, but there's also kind of a point between glancing blow and no blow at all. Now, luckily for us, it looks like there's going to be a couple of short waves. We're really looking for these ripples in our isobars right here that are going to push through. Here's one at 0Z. That's kind of why we see a lot of storms pop up along that time. That will probably be enough to trigger it. And then another thing is that our 700 millibar trough really looks like it's going to save the day coming through at that time as well. Then this is going to provide a bunch of favorable 700 millibar flow. Again, 700 millibar flow, here's our short wave. Once again, 700 millibar flow is going to be extremely favorable for tornadoes and general all hazards of severe weather. So that's kind of one of the big or main fail modes for today. And that's also another reason why deep layer shear further south might not build in until the later afternoon or mid-afternoon today. So that's going to be another thing to look at. I definitely think a lot of nowcasting is going to have to be done with this system because of just how widespread it is, and because I couldn't really pinpoint one area where it was definitely like we are not going to be seeing severe weather at all here today. And the last thing I want to look at is going to be a sounding, and the mixing in our thermodynamics, not bad. Definitely would like to see it a little warmer though, but we're seeing mid-60s dew points and then quite a bit of cape right up here in the mid levels, as well as 36 knots of bulk shear. Now, this is one of the issues with our setup. We're seeing anywhere between 30 to 40 knots of bulk shear along our main area of concern in the central plains. Now, if it's closer to 30 knots, that's kind of right on the edge of that area where we'd like it to be to see supercells. Obviously, the closer to 40 knots, the better. And then if you look at our hodograph in that area in the mid levels between the 2nd and the 6th kilometer, the atmosphere, this is pretty much as perfect as it could be for crosswise vorticity. Crosswise vorticity is not good for establishing a strong mesocyclone, which is going to be very important for tornadoes. But in the lower levels, we see pretty much 100% streamwise vorticity all the way up to the 2nd kilometer, which is going to be very favorable for tornadoes. So it's kind of at that point where we have some very favorable things going on. We also have winds turning with height, a super strong low level jet right here in between the 1st and 3rd kilometer. And generally, these winds are also increasing in strength with height as well. So that's going to be another one of our fail modes, kind of this S turning hodograph. And because we're not sure if we're going to have enough bulk shear to really have these storms sustain and if we're going to actually see them fire, I think we have a decent chance of seeing them fire today, though. So those are going to be the main fail modes. I don't think they're complete deal breakers, and I definitely think severe weather will be on the table. It's just going to affect the intensity of that severe weather. Other things to note is that our CAPE is going to be pretty solid. We're seeing anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 along that line within that most volatile window, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then also another thing that could be detrimental to our severe weather risk today is going to be how weak our lapse rates are in the first 3 kilometers. We'd like that number to be closer to 6.5 to 7 degrees Celsius per kilometer decreasing, and it looks like it's going to be pretty straight up and down. This is only showing about 6 Celsius decreasing per kilometer, and in some areas it's actually going to be worse. Once again, not a deal breaker because we have a lot of other very favorable things going on. Mostly shear instability and our dew point is going to be good, and those of course are the main things. And obviously as we go up into the mid levels, our lapse rates improve dramatically, going to 8 Celsius decreasing per kilometer, which would be very favorable for severe weather, and then also hail as well. So those are a couple of things which could hinder our storms. In the end, I think this is still a sounding that could produce a fairly strong tornado, as well as damaging winds, probably not closer to 70 miles an hour with this one. I think 70 miles an hour is still going to be on the table. And also, this is a sounding that could produce probably hail close to 2 inches in diameter.